Today is Wednesday, September 4th, and we are halfway through our grammar review. Today we talked about two. The first one is going to be pronouns. To look and think about what we know about pronouns, we looked for a little word that was inside of pronoun that would help us remember what it was related to, and we see the word noun. And it also makes sense as we look back to what does an adjective do, describes, modifies a noun or a pronoun. So pronouns must be very, very related to nouns, and indeed they are, because a pronoun is a word that takes the place of a noun. And I gave the example of a story, and in my story I did not use any pronouns. And what ended up happening is we kept replacing or saying the noun over and over and over, and it got a little distracting, it was hard to follow the story, and it got a little boring. And so we realized that we do need pronouns because they help break up the stories a little bit. They help make it clear who you're referencing without being too distracting. So we came up with some pronouns that we were able to substitute into my story, like they, them, he, she, it. And I asked students to make note of a couple of other pronouns, you and I. And I wanted them to make sure that we talked about you and I, because you is a pronoun that I've noticed students abbreviating with their text talk, as I like to call it. And when they're writing in their essays, I saw it in the summer reading assignments a lot, abbreviating it with the letter U instead of the Y-O-U. And so we talked about that there's an appropriate time for text talk, and that's not going to be in school while we're writing. So the other pronoun we talked about was I, because I'm seeing a lot of students who still are not capitalizing I. And when I is used as a pronoun, even in a contraction with I'm or I'll or I'd or I've, it always has to be capitalized. So some terms that we referred to, the first one was antecedent. And it's a pretty big fancy word, but really an antecedent is just the noun the pronoun refers to. And so we came to our example with our cat, and our pronoun here was it, or one of our pronouns. And so the antecedent is what it's referring to. It refers back to the cat. And it would be a little awkward and redundant to say the black cat with the shiny yellow eyes quickly crossed my path, and the black cat brought me very bad luck. So instead of saying cat again, we replace it with a pronoun, it. And we talked about how important it is to make sure that you say your noun, your antecedent, first before you mention the pronoun. Because if we started the story out with it quickly crossed my path, we wouldn't really have an understanding of what it was. So you always have to have a noun before you have a pronoun. And that noun that the pronoun refers back to is the antecedent. We also talked about some other terms, and we'll go into detail a little bit more later in the year, but just so that all the notes are in one place, we talked about demonstrative pronouns, and there are 4 of them. They demonstrate which one you're referring to, this one, that one, these, those. We talked about interrogative pronouns, and we looked at a little word or a word that we could make out of interrogative, and we came up with the word interrogate. We thought about those CSI Miami cop shows where they interrogate people, and what they're doing is asking questions. So very similarly, our interrogative pronouns introduce questions. Who are we talking about? What happened? Which one? And then our last pronoun is indefinite, and we looked at the prefix at the beginning of that, in. And we thought about other words that have in them. Incorrect, insane. And when we look at that, in means not. So indefinite pronouns are not definite. They are not referring to a definite one person. It could be anyone, or everyone, or both of you, or all of you. So indefinite pronouns don't have a very specific one person that we're talking about. And so our hint since pronouns and nouns are so closely related, is that that pronouns can be replaced by a noun. And it's important to do that, especially when we're talking about pronoun antecedent agreement, that the pronoun that we're substituting into our sentence actually matches the noun. And we'll talk more about that as we get into pronouns a little bit later in the school year. So that's our notes on pronouns.